Mike, since you're here by my side, I'd like to ask you about your perspectives on the growing participation of commercial space activities in space, particularly compared to when you were at NASA and now where we stand.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how well they've been doing in the privatization of it. And I think it's inevitable. I think even from the beginning of NASA, I think the hope was eventually that the government gives it a start, and then eventually private enterprise will get involved and figure out a way to make it profitable and more accessible. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And it's been about how long has it been? Almost 60 years, I guess, since we started flying people in space to begin with, and we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 8 this year. So I think it's really an exciting time because we're seeing, I think those first steps have already been completed, really, and now I think we're going to see it flourish in the next decade or so. When I arrived at NASA back in 1996 as an astronaut, there wasn't very much talk about privatization then, at least not in our world. We were flying the space shuttle and getting ready to build the space station, and that was what was happening back then in the mid to late 90s. And then I can't remember exactly when, but probably somewhere around when the X Prize was happening, and when that challenge went out. And I remember being very skeptical. I was like, "There's no way," because I knew that how much energy and effort it took for our government to get people to space. It's not so easy, and we haven't been to the moon since 1972, and people have all these dreams of wanting to do stuff. And I was like, it's really hard. It's hard enough for us to do it with our combining our forces with other countries of the world and our resources, combining them. It's still very tough with the Russians and European Space Agency and Japan and Canada and so on. It's still tough to get off this planet. So I remember when they first started talking about this, like, there's no way, it just can't happen. And then they did. The X Prize was successful with Burt Rutan and his Spaceship One, and then SpaceX came along. One of my colleagues went to work from Ken Bower-Sox. Was working there, and I was like, how's it, I still was very skeptical until they started being successful. And now I'm a full believer that now is the time is right. And I knew eventually it would happen, but I'm kind of surprised at how quickly it has happened. And between what they're, SpaceX, Blue Origins, Virgin Galactic, they're sucking a lot of the good talent we have here, which is great, from the Columbia students. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting in this next decade or so, what's going to be happening.
Good. And to what extent do you think that SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, the way that operate has also changed the way NASA operates?
Oh, I think it's NASA now now they have what we call a commercial crew program. So it's changed the way in which NASA deals with its contractors and building its spaceships. Generally, they would let out a contract or a proposal for, ask requests for proposal for contracts, and then these big giant companies would bid on it, and one would win, or maybe a combination or whatever, and that's the way they would manage those big contracts. What I think NASA has realized is that what these very clever entrepreneurs have been able to do, and we're talking about, I think, I know I'm not an entrepreneurial expert here, but I think these are some of the greatest entrepreneurs in our history, right? Currently in our world, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and so on, that are getting involved in the space program now. I think what NASA's seeing is what they're able to do is really impressive, and they're joining forces. We have this, Elon Musk, SpaceX, and Orbital ATK are providing launch services for cargo to the space station, which we lost that capability along with sending people when we stopped flying the shuttle. But now, working with those companies with their developed launch services of the space station, now we're launching cargo. So that's been very successful. And now we have this commercial crew program where SpaceX and Boeing will be providing launch services for astronauts to the International Space Station. So I think NASA is true believers in what's going on. We see a lot of hope for the future, and I hope a very good working relationship with these really smart companies to continue to get us off the planet successfully.